Victor Wembanyama entered the NBA with a level of hype rarely seen in sports history. People called him a once-in-a-generation talent, a player destined to change basketball forever. The alien was supposed to dominate the league and lead the San Antonio Spurs back to championship glory. But now, that dream has slipped away. And judging by his reaction, Wembanyama isn't taking it lightly. As the final buzzer sounded and the celebration began for the other side, Wembanyama stood frozen, watching confetti fall. He didn't need to say a single word. His expression said everything. We should have won this. But this story goes far beyond a heartbreaking finals loss. What has fans furious isn't just the outcome. It's how the game was officiated. Across social media, basketball analysts and fans are replaying controversial moments that many believe changed the course of the series. Missed fouls, questionable no calls, contact happening right in front of the officials that somehow went ignored. And one specific play has become the center of the entire debate, a moment so controversial that fans are still arguing about it, frame by frame, wondering how the referees failed to make the call. Stay with us, because this isn't just another highlight recap. We're breaking down everything the game itself, the foul trouble, the controversial officiating decisions, the key moments that shifted momentum, and the growing frustration surrounding the finals. We'll also examine the pressure Wembanyama faced, the mistakes that hurt the Spurs, and the reality that not every problem can be blamed on the referees, because this situation is far more complicated than it seems. Before we dive into the officiating controversy, let's look at how the finals reached this point. The Spurs didn't arrive here simply happy to participate. They believed they were the better team. After landing Wembanyama and transforming from a lottery franchise into a championship contender almost overnight, San Antonio entered the finals with confidence. This wasn't an underdog story. It felt like the beginning of a new era. And early in the series, Wembanyama looked every bit like the superstar everyone expected. The shot blocking was unreal. The scoring was dominant. The versatility was unmatched. He looked ready for the moment. But as the series progressed, things started to change. Every possession became critical. Every defensive stop mattered. Every whistle carried enormous weight. The margin between winning and losing became razor thin. That's what makes the controversy so difficult to ignore, because the missed calls didn't feel minor. They weren't the kind of plays fans usually forget about after the game. These were moments that many believe should have resulted in immediate whistles. And that's where the real debate begins. Because as the pressure intensified, Wembanyama found himself battling more than just the opposing team. There's no denying that Victor Wembanyama plays an incredibly physical style of basketball. With his massive wingspan, elite defensive instincts, and ability to challenge almost every shot near the rim, contact is naturally going to happen. That's part of what makes him such a dominant defender. Nobody is surprised by that. What surprised people was how often that contact occurred without drawing any reaction from the officials. You could see it happening in real time. The crowd noticed it. Players noticed it. Even the broadcast commentators seemed hesitant to ignore it. Yet, whistle after whistle never came. Now, let's be fair. No NBA game is officiated perfectly. Every fan base complains about missed calls. Every team believes they've been treated unfairly at some point. That's basketball. But there's a huge difference between occasional mistakes and a pattern that becomes impossible to overlook. And that's exactly what many fans believe happened here. As the game progressed, Wembanyama continued making aggressive plays that, under normal circumstances, often result in fouls being called. Yet time after time, the officials allowed play to continue. With every missed whistle, the intensity increased. The Spurs became more confident. The game became more physical. And the tension kept building toward a moment that would eventually set the basketball world on fire. Because none of the earlier incidents compared to what happened involving Jalen Brunson. This is a play everyone is talking about. If you've spent even a few minutes on basketball social media, you've probably seen the clip already. And if you haven't, this is where the controversy truly explodes. During a crucial sequence, Brunson suddenly hit the floor. This wasn't a routine collision. It wasn't a hard screen. And it certainly wasn't ordinary playoff contact. According to many fans and analysts, the replay appeared to show Wembanyama extending his leg, making contact, and causing Brunson to lose balance and fall. The footage quickly went viral. People replayed it from every angle. Slow motion, zoomed-in clips, frame-by-frame breakdowns, and the debate instantly began. Because if officials viewed that action as intentional or unnecessary contact, many believe it could qualify for a flagrant foul under NBA rules. That's what made the reaction so intense. Not just the play itself, but what happened afterward. Or more accurately, what didn't happen. There was no lengthy review, no major discussion among officials, no visible attempt to revisit the incident. The game simply continued. And almost immediately, fans erupted online. Social media feeds were flooded with reactions. Analysts started breaking down the footage. Former players weighed in. Thousands of fans demanded an explanation. How could such a controversial moment pass without further examination? That question became the center of the conversation. Then came the league's response, or what many people felt wasn't much of a response at all. The statements that followed were viewed by critics as vague and unsatisfying, doing little to answer the growing number of questions surrounding the incident. And that's when the controversy reached another level. Because this wasn't occurring in isolation, the timing made everything far more significant. At that stage of the finals, every foul mattered. Every technicality mattered. Every officiating decision carried enormous consequences. Which brings us to the most uncomfortable part of the story. Wembanyama's foul situation. At the time of the Brunson incident, discussions were already circulating about how close he was to potential disciplinary trouble. The margin was razor thin. One additional penalty, one crucial whistle, one decision going the other way. That's all it could have taken to dramatically alter the course of the game. And in a championship series where every possession feels like history in the making, those moments become impossible to forget. That's why fans are still talking about this play today. Because for many people, it wasn't just a missed call. And that's where the biggest question begins. Given everything surrounding that moment, was it really just a missed call? Or was it a decision that conveniently allowed the game to continue without removing one of its biggest stars from the floor? That's the question fans keep asking. Nobody needs to jump to conspiracy theories to understand why people are frustrated. The facts speak for themselves. A controversial play that many believe met the criteria for a flagrant foul involved a player already walking a disciplinary tightrope during the NBA Finals. The officials chose not to intervene, and to this day, many feel they never received a clear explanation. But the Brunson incident wasn't the end of the controversy. Not even close. Because another issue continued to surface throughout the game. The elbows. Multiple possessions featured moments where Wembanyama's elbows appeared to make contact with defenders while fighting for position or creating space. Now, to be fair, not every one of those plays was intentional. When you're dealing with a player built like Victor Wembanyama, with a wingspan unlike anything the league has ever seen, unusual contact is almost inevitable. But intent isn't always a deciding factor. The rule book focuses on the contact itself. And that's where the debate intensified. Several moments that looked whistle-worthy were allowed to continue without interruption. Then fans watched lighter contact on the opposite and result in fouls and free throws. That contrast became impossible to ignore, because now the discussion wasn't simply about missed calls. It was about consistency, or the lack of it. When one team feels like certain actions are being overlooked while similar plays are penalized on the other side, frustration starts spreading quickly. And in the NBA Finals, frustration can change everything. It affects defensive aggression. It changes rotations. It influences decision-making. Most importantly, it impacts trust. Players need to believe the same standard apply to everyone on the floor. When that belief disappears, every whistle becomes controversial. Every possession becomes an argument. And every result becomes open to debate. There was no doubt Wembanyama felt that tension. The Spurs felt it too. And now that the series is over, the conversation isn't disappearing anytime soon. But here's where the story becomes more complicated. Because if we're being honest about everything that happened, there's another truth that can't be ignored. Victor Wembanyama struggled at key moments during the finals. That statement might upset some fans, especially after everything we've discussed about the officiating. But both things can be true at the same time. Questionable calls can exist, and a superstar can still leave opportunities on the table. When the pressure reached its highest point, when fourth quarters tightened, when championship possessions demanded greatness, when Wembanyama didn't consistently take control of the game, that's not criticism. It's reality. The greatest players in basketball history have all battled controversial officiating at some point. They've dealt with missed calls, bad whistles, unfair moments. But what separates legends from everyone else is their ability to rise above those obstacles. They respond, they adjust, and they make such an overwhelming impact that the officiating becomes irrelevant to the final outcome. In this series, when Wembanyama wasn't able to do that often enough, that doesn't change his incredible talent. It doesn't erase his superstar potential. And it certainly doesn't mean he won't dominate this league for years to come. But it does highlight how much growth still lies ahead. There were shots that needed to fall, possessions that needed stronger execution, defensive sequences that required just a little more discipline, moments where the pressure of the finals appeared heavier than what he could fully handle at this stage of his career. For a young player experiencing the biggest stage in basketball, that's understandable, but it's still part of the story. And if the Spurs want to turn this finals run into future championships, they have to acknowledge those realities, because the missed opportunities weren't isolated incidents. They appeared repeatedly in the most important moments of the series. And those moments reveal exactly where Wembanyama stands today and how far he can still go. The scary part for the rest of the league? His ceiling remains unbelievably high. The finals may have exposed weaknesses, but they also showed flashes of a player who could one day dominate basketball for an entire generation. The potential is still sky high. Nobody is questioning that. If anything, this finals run proved just how special Victor Wembanyama can be. But it also exposed something important. For all the talk about being a once-in-a-generation talent, there are still parts of his game that need refinement. There are still lessons to learn, adjustments to make, and challenges to overcome. And that's completely normal. Even the greatest players in NBA history had moments where the spotlight revealed weaknesses they hadn't fully conquered yet. What's fascinating about this situation is that two truths can exist at the same time. The officiating controversy is real, and when Wembanyama's struggles in critical moments are real too. One doesn't cancel out the other. The referees can be questioned, the missed calls can be debated, and Wembanyama can still be held accountable for opportunities that slipped away. That's where this entire story lives, right in the middle of those two realities. And based on everything we've seen since the finals ended, Wembanyama understands that. That's what makes his reaction so interesting. The way he's carried himself, the frustration in his body language, the belief that the Spurs should have been champions. It all feels genuine because he truly believes his team was good enough to win. He believes the outcome wasn't inevitable. He believes the championship was within reach. And when you examine everything that happened throughout the series, it's hard to completely dismiss that feeling. At the same time, however, the finals place a spotlight on areas that opposing teams will undoubtedly study moving forward. That's what happens when you reach the highest level. Every weakness gets analyzed. Every mistake gets magnified. Every tendency gets exposed. The players who become legends aren't the ones who avoid those moments. They're the ones who use them. They turn criticism into motivation. They turn disappointment into fuel. They take every painful lesson and transform it into growth. That's a challenge facing Wembanyama now. The frustration is still fresh. The disappointment is still lingering. The feeling that something slipped away, or perhaps was taken away, is still impossible to ignore. That's natural after a loss of this magnitude. But ultimately, his legacy won't be defined by what he says today. It won't be defined by post-game reactions. And it won't be defined by social media debates. It will be defined by what happens next, how he responds over the coming seasons, how he improves, how he adjusts, and most importantly, what he does when he finds himself back on the final stage again, because eventually he probably will. Now, let's shift the focus away from Wembanyama for a moment, because there's a bigger issue sitting underneath this entire conversation, the NBA itself. And whether the league has a credibility problem when controversies like this continue to pile up That's a concern many fans are raising right now. When analysts, former players, coaches, and experienced basketball voices all find themselves questioning major officiating decisions during the finals, that isn't something the league can simply wave away. People watched the Brunson incident. People saw the disputed contact. People understood the foul implications and the potential consequences. And when a player appears to avoid a call that could have dramatically impacted the game, fans naturally want answers. Real answers, not vague statements. Not carefully crafted public relations language. Not generic explanations that avoid addressing the core issue. Because moments like these don't disappear once the final buzzer sounds. They stay with fans. They fuel debates. They create doubt. And most importantly, they raise questions about consistency and accountability. The NBA has faced these situations before. This certainly isn't the first officiating controversy in league history. In fact, some of the most famous finals moments ever played remain connected to disputed calls and controversial decisions. Some controversies eventually faded away. Others became permanent parts of NBA history. Stories still discussed years later. Whether the situation joins, that list depends largely on what happens next. And right now, many fans believe the silence surrounding the controversy is doing more damage than helping. Because silence creates speculation. And speculation creates distrust. What makes this situation even more significant is the player at the center of it all. Victor Wembanyama isn't just another star player. He's widely viewed as the future face of the NBA, the centerpiece of the league's next generation, the player many believe will carry professional basketball into its next era. And when a player of that magnitude becomes connected to a controversy like this, the conversation grows far beyond a single game. It becomes a league-wide issue because casual fans are paying attention too, not just die-hard Spurs supporters, not just basketball analysts. Everyone. They've seen the clips. They've watched the replays. They've heard the debates. And now they're making their own judgments about what happened. That's why trust matters so much. The NBA has survived controversy before. There's no question about that. But every major controversy leaves a mark. Every unanswered question chips away at confidence. And that's exactly why the story matters so much. Because in today's world, fans have endless entertainment options competing for their attention every single day. People don't have to stay invested if they feel something isn't right. Loyalty isn't automatic anymore. It's earned. And moments like this put that loyalty to the test. Which brings us back to Victor Wembanyama. Because when you step back and look at everything that happened, this might be the most important moment of his young career so far. Not necessarily the most painful, not necessarily the most shocking, but definitely the most revealing. The finals strip away all the projections, all the hype, all the conversations about what he might become someday. For the first time, the basketball world got a clear look at who Victor Wembanyama is right now. And right now, he's a phenomenal talent still learning how to navigate the chaos that comes with being a superstar on the biggest stage in sports. The pressure, the expectations, the scrutiny, the criticism, the officiating controversies, the spotlight that follows every move. This is a reality that comes with being the face of the future. And for the first time, Wembanyama experienced all of it at once. You can't simulate that. You can't prepare for it in practice. You have to live through it. Now comes the most important question of all. What does he do with it? Because moments like this create two very different paths. If this frustration becomes motivation, if this disappointment turns into obsession, if this loss pushes him to sharpen every weakness and elevate every aspect of his game, then years from now, this finals defeat might be remembered as the moment that created a champion. But if the frustration remains frustration, if the focus stays on what went wrong instead of what can improve, then the story changes completely. Because talent alone has never been enough. Not at the highest level. And this finals run proved that once again. There's another point that needs to be made as well. Far too many people are treating the situation like it has only one explanation. It doesn't. Some people are saying Wembanyama simply choked. End of discussion. Others are claiming the entire series was decided by officiating. They're both missing the bigger picture. Because the truth sits somewhere in the middle. The officiating controversy matters. The missed calls matter. The timing of those missed calls matters. A player operating that close to disciplinary consequences, being involved in those moments absolutely matters. But Wembanyama's performance matters too. The missed opportunities matter. The inconsistency in critical moments matters. The inability to fully take control when the Spurs needed him most matters. You can't ignore one side to strengthen the other. Both realities exist, and both deserve attention. That's the challenge Wembanyama faces right now. Sorting through what happened, understanding what was outside of his control, recognizing what wasn't, and figuring out exactly how he's going to respond. Because regardless of the debates, the finals are over. The Spurs didn't win. The trophy belongs to someone else. No social media argument changes that. No replay changes that. No controversy changes that. The result is final. The only thing left is what happens next. And ultimately, the future comes down to one person, Victor Wembanyama. Because the easiest way to silence every argument about officiating isn't through interviews. It isn't through complaints. It isn't through league investigations. It's through dominance. The kind of dominance that leaves absolutely no room for debate. The kind of dominance where missed calls become irrelevant because the outcome is undeniable. That's what separates great players from legendary players. And that's the opportunity sitting in front of Wembanyama right now. As for the NBA, the league still has questions to answer. Serious questions. Questions about officiating consistency. Questions about transparency. Questions about accountability. Because competitive integrity isn't just a talking point. It's the foundation that every professional sport depends on. And right now, many fans feel that foundation has been shaken. But even with all those concerns, the biggest question moving forward doesn't belong to the league. It belongs to Wembanyama. How does he respond? Because every controversy eventually fades. Every debate eventually ends. Every missed call becomes history. What lasts forever is how a player answers adversity. The finals didn't just reveal questions about officiating. They revealed exactly where Wembanyama stands today compared to where he wants to be tomorrow. And that's valuable, because the teams that honestly confront their weaknesses instead of hiding from them are usually the teams that return stronger. Right now, Wembanyama believes the Spurs should have won. Maybe he's right. Maybe they were 1 or 2 moments away from changing everything. But belief alone doesn't win championships. Performance does. Consistency does. Execution does. Being so overwhelmingly great that nobody can question the outcome. That's what wins championships. And while Wembanyama isn't fully there yet, one thing feels certain. That gap is now crystal clear. He sees it. The league sees it. The fans see it. And judging by the fire he's shown since this loss, it feels like he's already preparing to close that gap. If that happens, this won't be remembered as the season Victor Wembanyama lost a championship. It might be remembered as the season he discovered exactly what it takes to win one. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think the NBA owes Wembanyama and the Spurs a real explanation? Or do you believe his performance is the bigger story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a fellow basketball fan.